All right, welcome everybody. We are so excited to be with you today in the first of our 5-part webcast series called Realizing the Value of Generative AI Through Organization Transformation. By way of brief introduction, my name is Ian Lee. I am a VP and I lead our Generative AI Advisory and Org Transformation practice here at Cognixia. I am joined today by the illustrious Paul Roehrig, who is our Chief Strategy and Marketing Officer. I'll tell you a little bit more about him in a moment. And the crux of what we're going to be talking across our 5-part web series, which we're recording in snackable chunks because we know how busy our audience is really around this incredible wave, this hype cycle of generative AI, the likes of which we've never seen. I mean, we've been around the block, you and I, Paul, and this is just something else. And we've got a few gray hairs to show for it in this past year since things like ChatGPT came into the public consciousness. And I think collectively what we've observed in the marketplace is that there's a lot of focus, and naturally so, on experimenting with use cases and tools and technology. And it seems like every week there's a new application, whether it's general or built for purpose, that is appearing on the landscape. In the midst of all that maelstrom of activity, I think what we share a feeling on is that what can't be overlooked are the considerations and implications for the organization and the workforce when you think about scaling the use on a sustainable basis of GenAI tools across the workforce. It's going to completely change the way that work gets done. And I think, too, on the shoulders of that thought is the idea that we've moved beyond that initial fear, that trepidation around humans being replaced by machines. And instead, it's about humans that know how to take advantage of this technology to augment their capabilities, who are going to obviate the people that don't. I mean, I heard in another podcast that generative AI is kind of like giving everybody in your organization an Iron Man suit. And it's a matter of how do you strike the balance between governing the use of it and yet allowing people the ability to be able to go and explore exactly what they can do for it. I think the magic happens at that intersection. So this 5-part series is going to talk about a number of different perspectives around the impact on the workforce and the organization. I'm really excited to get into this conversation with you, Paul. We don't see each other enough. We don't get enough time to talk about these things, so this is perfect. And before we get going, to our audience, I want to toot Paul's horn for a moment. As I mentioned, he's our Chief Strategy and Marketing Officer. He's not just a doer, but a deep thinker, author of multiple award-winning and best-selling books, all of which actually happen to be about the intersection of man, machine, and digital. I couldn't think of a better person to join me today. So welcome, Paul. Getting right into it then, I'd love to hear your perspective. As there's been so much focus on the technology aspect of generative AI, I'd love to hear your perspective on why we believe that talent, workforce, and org transformation is so important, particularly at this juncture of our journey, our collective journey into generative AI.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it is one of the questions. There's a lot of, I still think there is a lot of trepidation, around all of us. Whether it's in a boardroom or around the dining room table. What do we do? What jobs should we have? How should we prepare? I heard Yuval Harari talking the other day, and he said for the first time in history, we don't know what to teach our children. And I'm not sure I agree with that, which is always a little bit risky to disagree with somebody of his stature, but we may not know everything, but I do think we know a lot. And to your point around, what is the role of humans in a digital, in an increasingly digital economy, I think it's more important, not less. I mean, we talk a lot about the technology because it is amazing. I mean, it's almost magical, and it's exciting and scary depending on what time of day it is and who you ask. But the beating heart of all of it is still of our economy and our society is human. And I don't think that is going to be replaced anytime soon. And so your point around workforce transformation, I think you're spot on. I think every job or almost every job is going to change due to, particularly in knowledge work, due to the new kind of knowledge bots that are coming out. But I think it's up to us, I think, to double down on being more human, in fact. The things that humans do are the things that the robots don't do. right? We, try to learn how to play guitar and write bad poetry, and we fall in love, and we're curious, and we have empathy, and robots can mimic that. But I think they're a long way from kind of replicating the benefits of actually being a human. To your point, I think the big dialogue right now, and what every company and every individual is or ought to be considering and wrestling with a little bit, is how do we re-engage ourselves in the work that we do, how we create value, and how do we do that better, faster, with the bot by our side.
And when you think about, engaging those workforces, we had a bit of a chat about this the other day. When you think about skills and capabilities, we talked a little bit about what's the availability of talent on the street these days that are ready to hit the ground running from a GenAI perspective versus, those that may not be. I'd love to hear your perspective on that too. And it could be a generational thing too, right?
Well, generational, but I think more philosophical. I think people that are leaning into the use of I think if you have an idea about, I was doing this kind of work this way, and it may be, it may be for months or years or decades, could be being able to look at that differently and say, how can I do that differently now that I have this new capability, right? And whether it's some kind of exoskeleton or an Iron Man metaphor, but they're all right. There's a human that's trying to solve a problem and create some value, and there's a bot that can make it. If you tame it right and you have the right kind of relationship and the mindset, then you can get better at what. And I think that philosophy is what's key, and being able to have the imagination to see how work is done and how it could be done differently. That's one thing, and the other thing is just being open and empathetic to the evolving situation around how work is being done. And those are very human things. That's not we don't look to a robot to be empathetic, right? We look to ourselves and each other to figure out how should a workforce, what kind of skills matter more tomorrow than they did yesterday. And I think you look at it and say that's a little bit scary because it's change. But I think it's actually pretty exciting. I think, in the early use cases, and we're still very early in this, are really exciting. There's amazing things that are happening, and the doomsday scenario is not turning out right. I mean, people have been predicting the end of civilization, forever, and so it's not happened, right? So I'm still long on humans. I think this is a great time to be a human being. And I think it's a great time to start learning how to use the new tools and technologies that can make our work and lives better.
I couldn't agree with you more. And what I'm hearing in your comments too is that combination of the mindset to embrace the technology, the curiosity to actually have, the impetus to go and actually start to test the boundaries of what's actually capable with generative AI tools, and applying a deep empathy and understanding of what the interplay between human capabilities versus generative AI capabilities and how they could come together.
I like history, right? And I think if you look back at historical precedent, you saw similar kinds of reactions and even similar headlines. I mean, I went down an internet rabbit hole looking at headlines when electricity was being introduced in the U.S. and it was terrifying, right? It was like death from above, and the same thing with the steam engines, right? Very same thing. And we figured it out. I mean, the good thing about, one of the beautiful things about humanity is that we're tool builders and we're tool users. And sometimes they get out of our control and less good things happen. And sometimes, by and large, normally we bring them back and, to make things, better overall.
And, as somebody that has their, finger on the pulse of the market, on a day-to-day basis, I'd love to hear, at a sort of a mid-level, where are you seeing, some of the emerging examples of how organizations and whether it's teams or individuals are starting to harness the abilities of generative AI to, contribute it in positive ways, whether it's productivity, creativity, release of bandwidth from what is commonly referred to drudgery or repetitive tasks. Where are you seeing, that happen day to day?
Yeah, it is a great question, and I think in some of the research that we've been doing and the others have been doing, kind of point to the notion of this. It's like a pointillist painting, right? It's dots on a canvas, right? And if you get enough dots, it looks like a dog or an umbrella or a beach. And right now, we're still putting the first dots on the paint. The use cases that are emerging where GenAI is delivering value, they're finely grained. It's very specific, very tactical at the task level almost. And some of the best use cases that I've seen at the enterprise level is people are like, once you get enough of those tasks where the bot is improving productivity, then a job or an activity, not even a job really, but an activity gets better. So it starts a few dots of paint, and then it gets a little bit clearer, and then it gets broader and broader. And we're still in the very early days of just trying things out and, playing and experimenting and piloting and exploring. And then, so it's amazingly invigorating, I think, because we're trying to do old things with new tools. And you can look through history as well, right? Somebody used to plow a field with a horse, and then they had a tractor, and then, right? So all of that process is the same with generative AI, only it's more applied to knowledge and content.
Right.
That's the really exciting part. But where I'm seeing people are interested broadly, acting much more tactically, and then they're starting to string these tasks together in a value chain. And then whether it's, drug discovery or software product engineering or what have you, and then that is going to continue to expand like ripples in a pond.
Yeah. I love that you use the Edouard Degas example of pointillism. I mean, because when you think about that, the idea of expressionism or impressionism is actually right on point. It's humans trying to express to a machine what it is, the intent is of what they want to achieve, and get that effort augmented by the tool or the platform. And that's what's so incredibly exciting about it. So as we go forward, and I say this to our audience, we're going to be covering off a number of different topics that will dive deeper into. I think, with your help today, Paul, this has been a great and exciting introduction into the series. And don't be surprised if we call you back, by the way. We're going to touch upon how do you actually assess the workforce in terms of the changes in bandwidth on where they spend their time on different categories of tasks. And what's the cause, cost, and consequence of doing that? We're then going to move into, this notion of reskilling and upskilling the workforce to be able to take the most advantage of the tools that are available today. And again, those ones that are appearing on the landscape on an almost daily basis. Thirdly, everything you touched upon too, really starts to broach the idea of change, enterprise level of change that needs to be managed, as you say, with empathy, so that people know how to take action in specific ways to move along that curve in terms of knowledge and maturity and comfort, both for themselves and for their enterprise. And then we'll close off with what we believe to be some pragmatic steps that our audience can take, and even reach out to us, for some additional perspective and guidance. So I'm really looking forward to this series. Paul, I want to thank you again. We promised that we would make these short and snackable, but we're going to continue the conversation. It's been a real pleasure to have you with us today, and we're looking forward to engaging with you more as we go forward.
Awesome. Best of luck with the series, and thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you.